I was 12 when I first walked into that building. I thought it was just another rich man's office, the kind my mother scrubbed at night while the city slept. By the time I walked out, my life belonged to a man everyone else whispered about in fear, but that morning I didn't even know his name. The smell of alcohol and cheap medicine still clung to my clothes when I stepped out of our apartment. Ma had spent the night coughing, the kind of cough that sounded like something tearing inside her. Her uniform hung on the back of the chair, still damp from yesterday's rain, and I pulled it over my own clothes, sleeves falling past my wrists. "Ti dij no," she had whispered, voice rough, eyes wet. "They don't want kids there, Lucía." "Then they don't have to see a kid," I answered, tying the black apron twice around my waist. "They'll see someone who can mop a floor and carry a bucket. Rent is due on Friday, Ma." She had tried to sit up, but the fever pushed her back down. I remember the way her hand grabbed my wrist, bones sharp under her skin. "If they ask, you tell them I'm coming back tomorrow. You don't argue, you don't talk back, you just keep your head down." I nodded, even though my heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I kissed her forehead, it burned under my lips, and stepped out into the grey morning, praying quietly that she'd still be breathing when I came home. The building was on the other side of the city, where the cars were clean and the trash didn't touch the sidewalks. Glass walls rose so high they seemed to cut the clouds. I stared up, my fingers tightening on the small plastic bucket I'd brought, the handle digging into my skin. Inside, the lobby felt colder than outside, the kind of cold that money made. Marble floors, gold edges, security cameras like small black eyes in every corner. The guard at the front desk barely glanced up before saying, "Employees use the service entrance." I'm with the cleaning staff," I said. My voice sounded small in the big space. "My mom is sick, I came instead." Now he did look at me. His gaze went from my thin arms to the big uniform to my scuffed shoes. For a second I thought he might laugh. Instead he pressed a button on the phone, eyes never leaving me. "She says she's with Alina," he said into the receiver. "Yeah, a kid." The silence between his words and the answer felt like it lasted an hour. He listened, then hung up slowly. "Top floor," he said. "Mr. Valenti wants to see you first." He handed me a visitor badge with shaking fingers, like even touching something that had to do with this man made him nervous. I didn't understand why. To me, Valenti sounded just like any other rich boss who shouted about streaks on the glass. In the elevator, the floor numbers climbed too fast. My reflection in the metal walls looked like someone else, a kid playing dress-up in a world that didn't belong to her. On the 22nd floor, two men in navy suits stepped in. They were big, not gym big, but street big, like they were used to pushing people out of their way. One of them had a silver chain at his wrist and a gun-shaped bulge under his jacket that I tried not to stare at. They looked at my badge, then at me. "You lost, Nina?" the taller one asked. "I'm here to work," I managed, "for my mom." He exchanged a look with his friend, a short, wordless conversation I couldn't read. Then, without saying anything else, they rode up with me to the top. When the elevator doors opened, they stepped out too. The top floor didn't look like an office. It looked like an expensive living room someone had turned into a war room by mistake. Dark wood, leather chairs, tall windows showing the whole city under a pale sky. Oil paintings on the walls, old and serious, like they were watching everything. At the far end, behind a desk the size of our whole kitchen, sat a man in a deep blue suit. He was the first thing in that room that didn't seem polished. His hair was long and pushed back, dark like the beard that framed his mouth. A scar cut across his eyebrow and down his cheek, thin and pale, like an old river that used to carry blood. His hands rested on the desk, big, heavy hands with veins and faded tattoos curling out from under the cuffs of his shirt. Behind him, the city looked tiny. Inside the room, no one spoke. The air felt thick, like everyone had been holding their breath before I even walked in. The two men in suits moved to stand behind his chair, one on each side. Another man closed the door quietly and took his place near it, arms crossed. I suddenly realized this wasn't just a boss. This was someone people guarded. His eyes lifted to mine and my feet almost stopped moving. They were a strange color, gray with tired gold around the edges, like a storm with sun behind it. Dangerous but not wild. Dangerous because they were too calm. "You're not Alina," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it filled the whole room. No accent I could place, just street mixed with something older. "My mom is sick," I replied, forcing myself to stand straight. "She couldn't come, I came to work for her instead." Someone behind him let out a quick laugh, the kind you release without meaning to. It died in the air as soon as the man at the desk turned his head just a little. He didn't say a word, but the room somehow got even quieter. He looked back at me. How old are you? 12. Too young for this place. His gaze moved over the big sleeves, the bucket in my hand, the nervous way I kept shifting my weight. Your mother knows the rules. She also knows we don't eat if she doesn't show up, I answered before I could stop myself. My voice shook, but the words were out. She said if I kept my head down and worked fast, you wouldn't have to know. His eyebrows raised slightly, the scar pulled just enough to soften his face instead of making it harsher. But now I do know, he said. Don't you think that's a problem? My stomach twisted. The men in the room were watching me, some curious, some bored, one or two like they were waiting for a show. I felt heat rise to my face, but I kept my feet rooted to the floor. If I ran, there'd be no rent, no medicine, no food. I swallowed. If you send me home, we still don't eat, I said quietly. If you let me stay, I can clean like she does. I know how. I've watched her. For a long moment, he didn't reply. His eyes stayed on me, searching, like he was trying to read something that wasn't written on my face yet. Then he reached under his desk and pulled out a thin black folder. He laid it down in front of him and opened it with careful fingers. I caught my mother's name on the first page, ELENACRUZ, typed in sharp letters, red underlined. Beneath it, numbers, too many numbers. My mouth went dry. I'd never seen this folder before, but the feeling in my chest told me it wasn't something good. The man in blue watched my reaction closely. She owes you money, the question slipped out. I didn't mean to say it aloud. He tapped one of the lines with a finger. Elena owes this building, he said slowly, and this building belongs to me. He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. So yes, she owes me. The word me didn't sound like it belonged to just a person. It sounded heavier, like it belonged to a whole world I hadn't seen yet. He closed the folder and rested both hands on top of it. Do you know what happens in this city when people don't pay what they owe, Pequenia? I thought of the stories whispered on our block. Men in dark cars, broken windows, people who moved away in the middle of the night and never came back. My throat tightened, but I couldn't make the words come. I just shook my head. He studied me for another few seconds, then exhaled slowly as if something inside him hurt. Everyone out, he said. The order was soft, but every man in the room reacted like a gun had gone off. Chairs slid back, footsteps moved, the air shifted as they passed by me one by one, avoiding my eyes. The door clicked shut behind the last of them. Suddenly it was just the two of us, a 12-year-old girl in a borrowed uniform, and a man whose name sat on every scared mouth in my neighborhood, though I didn't yet realize it. He leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers together, eyes never leaving my face. Without the others watching, something in his expression changed. The hardness was still there, but under it I saw something like tiredness or regret. What did you say your mother's name was exactly? He asked. Elena Cruz, I repeated. She cleans your offices at night, apartment 4B on Marín Street. For the first time since I walked in, his calm cracked, just a little. His jaw tightened and his eyes flickered, as if the name had hit some hidden place inside him that he'd spent years burying. He opened the folder again, staring at my mother's name, then at me. His voice, when it came, was lower than before. There are things about your mother you don't know, Lucía. He turned the folder slowly so it faced me, his finger resting on a line of text I couldn't read from where I stood. And if you stay here today, he said, the city shining cold and distant behind him, you're going to find out who I really am. I should have been afraid of him in that moment, but something strange happened instead. I felt more afraid of the empty refrigerator at home than of the scar on his face. I can go, I whispered, fingers tightening around the bucket handle. I just wanted to help. He watched me for a long time, then closed the folder again with a soft thud, as if he was sealing something he didn't really want to look at. His eyes weren't cold, not exactly. They were tired, like he'd seen this same story too many times, just with different names. Sit, he said, nodding at the chair in front of his desk. I'm fine standing. His eyebrow lifted a little. That wasn't a suggestion. The way he said it made my knees move before my brain decided anything. I set the bucket down, climbed into the leather chair, and tried not to sink into it like it was swallowing me. It was too big, too soft, too expensive for someone with holes in her shoes. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Do you know who I am, Lucía? I shook my head. The boss. A corner of his mouth twitched. That's one word for it. He tilted his head, studying my face with an intensity that made me want to look away. Out there, people call me Valenti, some call me Don, some Sir. Some don't say my name at all because they prefer breathing. I swallowed. The room suddenly felt smaller. My mom just calls you El Jefe, she never says more. Good, he murmured. She's always been smart like that. His gaze drifted past me for a second, as if he was seeing someone else sitting where I was. She should have left this city when I told her to. The words hit me like cold water. You talked to her about leaving. Before he could answer, a quick knock hit the door. It opened half an inch, just enough for one of the suited men to slide his head in. Boss, the guy from the port, Sergio, he's here, says it can't wait. Valenti's jaw tightened, annoyance flashing across his eyes. Tell him to wait. The man hesitated. He's nervous, says the Russians moved the shipment if we don't. I said, Valenti repeated, turning his head slowly toward the door, he can wait. Those three quiet words sucked the air out of the hallway. The man nodded so fast it looked painful. Claro, boss. The door clicked shut again. I stared at that door for a moment, imagining what kind of problem made grown men in tailored suits so nervous, and what kind of man told them all to wait because a 12-year-old showed up with a mop. When I looked back at him, his expression had already changed. The hardness from a second ago was buried under something else, something almost gentle but still dangerous, like a knife carefully wrapped in velvet. You said your mother cleans here at night, he said. You come with her. Sometimes, I admitted. When she was too tired to walk home alone, I'd help carry the rags. She didn't want anyone to see me, so we'd use the stairs and the back door. He nodded slowly, as if a few puzzle pieces were slipping into place. Marín Street 4B, he repeated under his breath, like he was testing how the words tasted. I know that building. I frowned. You've been there. A lifetime ago. His eyes met mine again, sharper now. Your mother, she once did something for me, something no one else would have done. I told her if she ever needed anything, she should come to me. Instead, she ended up owing me money on paper just so I could keep certain people away from her door. I blinked, confused. You put her in debt to protect her. He gave a humorless smile. Men like me don't give charity, we give structure. A piece of paper that says, this one is under my shadow, touch her, you touch me. It was the only way she'd accept anything. My chest tightened. I pictured my mother signing something she didn't understand, thinking only about rent and medicine and another month of survival. You could just forgive it, I said quietly. Rip the paper. He looked at me like no one had ever said something that simple to him before. For a second, he seemed almost young. You talk like the world is kind, he said. It is. If I forgive it for her, I have 50 more at my door tomorrow asking why I didn't forgive theirs. Kindness is expensive in my business, Lucía. Maybe it's still cheaper than fear, I replied, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe even respect. Then he shook his head as if arguing with himself. He reached for the phone on his desk and dialed a number by heart. Dr. Ramos, he said when someone picked up. I'm sending a car. There's a woman on Marín Street, building 12, apartment 4B, high fever, lungs. You take her to the private clinic, put everything under my name. If anyone asks, she's family. My mouth fell open. W, what are you doing? Paying an old debt, he answered simply, and creating a new one maybe. He covered the receiver with his hand, eyes locking on mine. You want your mother alive tomorrow, she. I nodded so fast my neck hurt. He finished the call and set the phone down with careful fingers. You're going home now. My driver will take you. You'll pack a small bag for your mother, clothes, her documents, anything important. Then you'll wait with her until my doctor arrives. I stared at him, heart racing. And the job, the money. His gaze didn't soften, but his voice did. You already worked today, Nina. You walked into the lion's mouth and didn't cry. I'll pay Elena for that. He paused. From now on, she doesn't clean at night. She doesn't work in any of my buildings. She's done. That's good, I said slowly, though the thought of less money scared me. But if she doesn't work, how do we? You'll come back, he cut in. After your mother is at the clinic, you'll return here. Alone, we'll talk about how you can help your family without carrying a mop. I felt a chill that wasn't entirely fear. What does that mean? He leaned back, the city lights reflected in his eyes even though it was still morning. It means you stepped into my world today. That door doesn't close easily, but I won't force you. He tapped the folder with my mother's name. I will, however, make sure no one else uses you to get to her. If you're going to be in danger, it will be under my roof where I can see it." There was something twisted and tender in that promise, protection and threat woven so tight I couldn't separate them. Another knock hit the door harder this time. The same man from before stuck his head in, face pale. "Boss, they're on the block already, 3 cars. Sergio says they're asking about you by name." Valenti's eyes darkened. The calm slipped over him like armor. "Get the men downstairs. No one shoots unless I say, move." The door slammed shut. He stood up and the room changed with him. He wasn't just a man in a chair anymore. He was a storm about to break. He rounded the desk and stopped in front of me. Up close, I could see tiny lines around his eyes, the kind you get from squinting against too much light or too many memories. "You listening, Lucía?" he said. "Yes," my voice came out barely louder than a breath. "You go home with my driver, straight home, window up, head down. You see anything outside your building that feels wrong, you call this number." He slipped a small black card into my hand, his fingers rough but careful. "You memorize it, you burn it. You don't ever speak it out loud where strangers can hear." My fingers closed around the card like it was a lifeline. Are they coming for you?" "They're always coming for someone," he said. "Today it just happens to be me." He walked me to a private elevator, the kind without buttons, just a key he turned himself. As the doors slid shut between us, he looked at me one last time. "Your mother once hid me when the whole neighborhood wanted my blood," he said quietly. "I walked into her apartment half dead and she didn't ask who I'd killed. She just put a wet towel on my head and said, 'You're somebody's son.'" His throat moved like the memory hurt. "I didn't deserve that kindness. I probably don't deserve a second chance now, but you might." The doors closed, cutting off whatever else he was about to say. An hour later, when the car turned onto Marín Street, my entire body went cold. Our building was there, same dirty bricks, same broken mailbox, except for one thing. A black car I'd never seen before was parked right in front of our door, engine off, windows dark. Valenti's driver cursed under his breath. "Stay in the car," he snapped, already reaching under his jacket. But I was already pushing the door open, heart slamming against my ribs, my mother's name burning on my tongue as I ran toward the building, straight toward the strangers waiting in the shadow of our staircase. The man nearest the door moved first, stepping out of the shadow with a slow smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Que prisa, little girl," he said in accented Spanish, blocking the stairs with his body. "Where are you running to?" I tried to push past him, but his hand closed around my shoulder, not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to tell me I wasn't going anywhere he didn't allow. Up close he smelled like cold air and cigarette smoke. 2 more men leaned against the wall behind him, hands in their jackets, eyes already bored like this was just another job. "I live here," I answered, breathing fast. "My mom is sick, I have to." 4B, he asked too quickly. Every muscle in my body went tight. "Why?" He grinned wider, showing the gold cap on one tooth. "We just want to talk to her. She works nights, doesn't she? Cleaning a very interesting building." His thumb pressed into my shoulder, not quite gentle anymore. "You come from there now." Before I could lie, heavy footsteps sounded behind me. Valenti's driver, Mateo, I'd learned his name in the car, was already halfway out of the sedan, one hand up, the other in his jacket. "Let her go," he called. "The girl's not your problem." Goldtooth's eyes flicked to the car, taking in the black paint, the tinted windows, the plates. Recognition moved across his face like a shadow. His grip on me changed. Now I wasn't someone in his way, I was leverage. "Not my problem," he repeated, laughing softly. "I think she's exactly my problem, and yours and your jefe's." Mateo's jaw clenched. "Kid," he said to me without looking away from the man, "get back in the car, now." Goldtooth slid his hand down to my wrist, fingers wrapping all the way around it. "You take one more step," he told me quietly, "and I tell my friend to pull the thing in his pocket. Then your driver has to decide if the boss likes you more or this nice calm sidewalk." My heart hammered so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The second man had already shifted, jacket lifting just enough for me to see the metal under it. From the corner of my eye, I saw curtains twitch in the apartments above us. People were watching, but nobody was opening a window. On Marín Street you only watched, you never interfered. I swallowed hard. "We don't know your boss," I said. "We don't know anything." Goldtooth leaned down, his breath warm against my ear. "Everyone knows your boss, Pequeña. They just pretend not to until we come ask. The way he said your boss sent a chill through me. He wasn't talking about my mother's supervisor, he meant Valenti. A car door slammed at the corner. Another black sedan, same make as the first, rolled to a stop, and for a moment I thought more of them had arrived. The three men turned their heads, hands tightening in their coats, then froze. Valenti stepped out. He wasn't surrounded by a crowd this time, just one man at his back and another at the wheel. He closed the door with a soft click, like this was any other visit to any other building, and walked toward us with his hands visible, no rush in his step. The blue suit from that morning was gone, replaced by a darker one, almost black, coat open against the cold. The scar on his face looked sharper in the bad light of Marín Street. "Let her go," he said, voice low but clear. For a second, relief almost knocked the strength out of my knees. Then I remembered why these men were here in the first place, and that relief turned into something else. A sharp, cold fear that wasn't about empty fridges anymore. Gold Tooth's fingers tightened on my wrist. "You came fast, Valenti," he said in English this time, accent thicker. "We barely had time to say hello to your little friend." "You don't say hello with guns," Valenti replied. His eyes never left mine as he spoke, like he needed to be sure I was still breathing. "You say hello with hands." He raised both of his palms open, like this. The second man laughed under his breath. "Always a poet," he muttered. "You bring what we asked for," Gold Tooth said. "Port list, new terms, all of it." "I brought something better." Valenti finally looked at him. The calm in his eyes had changed. It wasn't the cold calm from the office. This one had heat under it, like a rope pulled too tight. "I brought an end to this." Gold Tooth's smile thinned. Big words. He jerked my wrist hard enough to make me stumble. "But you come into my neighborhood with two men, no army, and a kid already in my hand. That looks more like suicide than negotiation." "You came into my neighborhood," Valenti corrected softly, "and you touched the wrong door." He took another step. I saw the moment the second man's fingers tightened around his gun, the way his eyes measured distance and time. I also saw something else behind them at the corner of the block, the faint blue flash of hidden lights, police cars, engines off, waiting. Valenti had brought more than two men. He'd brought the one thing men like him hated almost as much as each other, the law. Gold Tooth followed my glance and swore. "You called cops," he hissed. "You think they're going to save you from us?" "I didn't call them to save me," Valenti said. "I called them to save her." His gaze cut to me like a promise. "I'm tired of kids growing up thinking monsters wear only one face." For the first time I saw it clearly. Fear. Not in me, not in my neighbors' windows, but in the men holding the guns. Because police meant records and witnesses and questions that didn't go away. One of the blue lights flashed again, closer now, sirens still off. Quiet on purpose, someone had planned this. Gold Tooth cursed in his own language, low and vicious. "You want to fall, you fall alone," he spat. "We'll take what we need from the pieces." He yanked me toward him, dragging me between his body and the man with the gun, using me as a shield. Cold metal pressed against my side as his friend shifted position. Matteo took a step forward, gun finally out, eyes wild. "Drop her," he roared. Valenti's arm shot out, stopping him. "No." His voice cut through everything, the whispers above us, the faraway hum of city traffic, the distant crunch of tires that meant the police were starting to roll. "No bullets, not here, not with her." "So you pick Don," Gold Tooth snarled. "Her or your ports, her or your pretty empire. You think we can't find the people you hide behind fake debts and clean buildings." The word debts made my stomach drop. This wasn't random. They knew about my mother, about the folder, about the protection Valenti had tried to make look like business. Valenti's face changed then in a way I never forgot. Not rage, not panic, something heavier. A choice settling onto his shoulders like a coat he'd always known he'd have to wear someday. He took one slow breath. "You won't touch Elena or the girl or anyone on this block." Gold Tooth pressed something cold against my neck. "And how will you stop us?" Valenti's eyes flicked once more to the corner, where the first police car rolled into view, lights finally spinning, siren just starting to wail. Neighbors pulled curtains tighter. A dog started barking down the street. "I already did," he said. Everything after that felt like a dream with the volume turned too high. Sirens exploded around us. Doors slammed, officers shouted, the bright white of their flashlights cutting across faces and steel. "Police, hands where we can see them." Matteo dropped his gun first, letting it clatter onto the pavement with exaggerated slowness. Valenti followed, lifting his hands higher than he had for Gold Tooth, as if this surrender was the heavier one. Gold Tooth hesitated a second too long. The gun at my side jerked. I felt his arm tense. Before he could decide whether to use me or drop me, Valenti moved. He stepped forward fast, faster than I'd seen anyone in a suit move in my life, putting himself between me and the metal. There was a deafening crack, the smell of burned air, the hot whisper of something slicing the space near my ear. Valenti's body hit mine, knocking the breath out of my lungs as we fell. My knees slammed the concrete. He landed partly over me, heavy, shielding me from the chaos around us. Somewhere someone screamed. Another shot fired, this one answered immediately by a dozen more, not aimed at us. Then it was over. My ears rang, my hands scraped against the ground, shaking. I could taste dust and metal. Valenti's weight pressed me down, but even in that panic, something about him felt careful. He wasn't crushing me, he was taking most of the fall himself. "Can you move?" he asked, voice rough in my ear. I nodded, though it probably looked more like a twitch. He pushed himself up with a small bitten-off sound, and that's when I saw the dark stain spreading across his sleeve, high on the arm. Not a pool, just a line of wet, blooming through the fabric. "You're bleeding," I whispered. He glanced at it like it belonged to someone else. "You're not," he said. "That's what matters." Police hands grabbed Gold Tooth and his men, pushed them against the wall, snapped metal around their wrists. One officer shouted codes into a radio. Another was yelling about calling an ambulance. Someone tried to pull me up, but I clung to Valenti's jacket until he himself helped me to my feet. The cops knew him. You could see it in their faces. The recognition, the calculation, the quiet surprise. A man like this usually didn't let himself be caught in the open, not without exchanging half a city in bullets first. "Hands behind your back, Mr. Valenti," one of them said, voice formal but respectful, like he was arresting a politician instead of a criminal. He obeyed, no argument, no negotiation, just a small, tired smile as the cold metal closed around his wrists. "Elena Cruz," he said to the nearest officer, nodding at our building. "Apartment 4B, high fever, chest. Your people will find a doctor already on the way. She and the girl are under my protection." The officer frowned. "You're not in a position to protect anyone, sir." Valenti looked at me. His eyes were steady, even as blue and red light painted his face in sharp colors. "I am if you write it down," he said. "If I talk, if I keep talking." The officer's expression changed slowly, the way a sky changes before a storm. "Are you saying you're willing to cooperate?" "I'm saying I'm done pretending I'm protecting people by scaring them," Valenti replied. "You want ports, accounts, names, you'll have them, but not before you make sure no one touches that apartment or this street, ever." Everything after that blurred. They put him in a car, separate from the others. Matteo disappeared into the crowd of uniforms. I caught one last look at his face, torn between loyalty and something like relief. By the time my mother's doctor arrived with the clinic ambulance, the sirens outside had faded, and Valenti was gone. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and boiled coffee. My mother lay in a narrow bed, an oxygen tube at her nose, monitors blinking soft green around her. She looked smaller than she ever had at home, swallowed by white sheets and too much light. "Lucia," she whispered when she saw me, eyes wet. "Que hiciste, Mija, where did you go?" "I went to work," I said, sitting at her side, taking her hand. "And I met your boss." Her fingers tightened weakly around mine. "I told you to stay away from that building." "I know," I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "He sent the doctor, he sent the car. And Mama, he was at our building, the men with the black car, they weren't his. They were looking for him, for you, because of him." Something broke in her face when I said that. A mix of fear and guilt and something older, deeper. She stared at the ceiling for a long moment before speaking. "I tried to keep you out of that world," she whispered. "I thought if I cleaned their floors and kept my head down, the dirt would stay on my hands, not yours." "You tried," I said, "but it found us anyway." A knock on the door cut through the beeping. A policewoman stepped in, notepad in hand, her expression a careful mix of professional and gentle. "Senora Cruz," she said quietly, "we need to ask you some questions about Mr. Valenti." My mother's eyes fluttered closed for a moment, as if the name itself hurt. Then she opened them and looked at me. "Stay," she said. If you're old enough to walk into his office, you're old enough to hear why he never should have been in our lives. So I stayed. I heard how years before I was born, a younger Valenti had stumbled into our old building, bleeding and half-conscious, chased by men who wanted him dead. How my mother, barely older than I was now, had hidden him in a closet and wiped blood off the hallway before anyone could see. I heard how she could have sold him out to the police or to the men looking for him and maybe earned herself a reward. How she had instead boiled water, cleaned his wounds and told him, "You're somebody's son, I don't need to know more." I heard how he'd left before dawn, leaving only a note with a number and a promise she'd never intended to use. "If you ever need anything, call." She never called, but the city did. It whispered about a woman on Marín Street the Mafia owed, and other criminals listened. Years later, when Valenti rose and needed to show he owned certain blocks to protect them, he put her name on his ledgers as if she owed him instead to keep the wolves confused. It worked for a while until it didn't. By the time the officer left, my mother was exhausted, voice raw, eyes half closed. I sat there in the dim hospital light, her story echoing in my head, and realized something that made my chest ache. He wasn't just paying back a favor, he was trying to become the man she'd treated him like that night. Somebody's son, not just somebody's monster. Years passed. People in our neighborhood still talked about that day, how the great Valenti walked into a police car with his head high, how he tore his own empire down from the inside, how he testified in long, slow trials that filled news reports for months. Other bosses called him a traitor, some wanted him dead, but behind closed doors in small apartments like ours, people used another word, finally. Finally someone with power had decided enough was enough. He wrote to my mother once from prison, just one letter. I wasn't supposed to read it, but she left it on the table and cried in the kitchen, and I was still 12 and curious and hurting. "Elena," it said, in handwriting surprisingly neat for someone with his reputation. "I told myself for years I was protecting people like you by staying where I was, because bad men would always exist and at least with me you knew the rules. I was wrong. The day your daughter walked into my office, I saw every lie I'd ever told myself standing there in one too big uniform. You saved my life once by hiding me. This time I'm saving it by finally stopping being the reason people have to hide. Take whatever the court lets you keep of what was in your name. Use it for her. Don't ever let her walk into a place like mine with a bucket again." My mother folded the letter carefully, kissed it once, then burned it over the sink. "We move forward," she said, voice shaking but certain, "not with his shadow over us, with our own light." We did. With the hospital bills covered by the assets the court transferred from his accounts, my mother finally stopped cleaning at night. I started school again, really started, no more half-days or skipped homework because I was too tired. I studied in that same kitchen where she used to iron uniforms, textbooks spread where stacks of unpaid bills had once sat. On my 18th birthday, I took a bus 4 hours out of the city to a place I'd only seen on official letters, the prison where they kept him. I told my mother I was going to visit a university. In a way, I was. The visiting room was smaller than I imagined. Plastic chairs, a metal table, a faint smell of old sweat and disinfectant. When he walked in, escorted by a guard, I almost didn't recognize him at first. His hair was shorter, more grey at the temples. The beard was trimmed close. The scar on his face seemed deeper, like time had traced it again and again while he slept. But his eyes were the same, tired storm with that ring of gold around the edges. "You grew up," he said, sitting across from me. There was no glass between us, just the weight of everything that had happened. "Of course you did, that's what time does." "I got into university," I blurted, suddenly shy. "Pre-law program, they gave me a scholarship." His eyebrows lifted. "A bagada," the word rolled off his tongue slowly, almost reverent. "So you'll spend your life fighting men like me." "I'll spend my life fighting what you built," I corrected softly, "but also what built you." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Good, maybe you'll do what I was too cowardly to do until it was too late." I shook my head. "You weren't cowardly that day on Marín Street." He gave a small, sad smile. "I was making up for 1,000 other days." He leaned forward, chains at his wrists clinking softly. "Do you hate me, Lucía?" I thought about the empty fridge, the nights my mother coughed so hard she saw stars, the men with guns at our door. I also thought about the way he'd thrown himself in front of a bullet meant for someone else's child, the phone call to the doctor. the folder he'd turned into ashes in front of the whole court when he forgave every debt that was really just protection. "No," I said finally, "but I don't admire you either. I'm grateful, and I'm glad you decided to stop." He closed his eyes for a second, like that answer hurt and healed at the same time. "That's fair," he said. We talked until the guard said time was up. He didn't try to make himself sound better than he was. He told me about the boys he'd brought into the business when they were my age. Some were dead, some locked in other parts of the same building. He told me he still woke up at night hearing shots that had happened years ago. "Prison is not my punishment," he said quietly, standing as the guard approached. "Living long enough to understand what I did is." At the door, he turned back once more. "Do me a favor," he said. "What?" "Never tell your children my name like a legend," he answered. "If you tell this story, tell it like a warning. Not all powerful men are monsters, but no man who makes his living from fear is truly strong." I nodded. "I'll tell them about a man who thought power was control," I said, "and who finally learned it was protection, and let go." His eyes shone, but he didn't look away. "That will leave everyone speechless," he murmured. "A boss who finally understands he's just a man." The door closed behind him with a heavy clang. Today, when people ask why I chose the work I do, representing families like mine, girls like the one I used to be, I tell them about a day when my mother was too sick to go to work, and I walked into her place. I tell them about marble floors, a scarred man in a blue suit, and a folder with our name on it. About black cars on Marín Street, and a choice made in a spray of sirens and concrete dust. I don't tell the story to make him a hero. I tell it to show that even in the dirtiest corners of this world, someone can still decide to put down the gun, to trade fear for something softer and much harder: responsibility. I was 12 when I met a Mafia boss who everyone thought was untouchable. I was 12 when I watched him choose to fall so that a girl with a borrowed uniform and a sick mother could stand up. Everything I've done since, every late night in the library, every client I fight for in court, is my way of proving one thing he taught me without meaning to. Real power isn't who sits highest. Real power is who's willing to step down first, so someone else can finally breathe.